Welcome to Season 4 of DM Gives Inspiration. It's good to be back, and this season will be inspiring. We're going to spend less time on rules and talk about more cool things you can do in your game, and we're going to dive right in with time travel. And time travel is one of those classic fantasy and sci-fi tropes. It's a lot of fun. But we first have to admit that time travel, particularly impressive time travel, works way better in a non-interactive environment. Characters in movies and books follow the plot. In Harry Potter, Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry Potter stands up and defends his past self because he realizes he has to. Your players may not make that connection. So when we make a time travel event, a quest, a part of your campaign for your greater story, we need to make sure there is lots of wiggle room for activity, for player agency. And as with all sci-fi and fantasy story devices, we're going to call time travel here a device. Time travel is a vehicle to tell your story, to expand your world's lore. Time travel itself should not be the goal of the adventure. It should be to change the past, nullify a bad decision, gain information about the future, all the while meeting interesting NPCs and performing deeds that are enjoyable for your table. And because of this, I recommend you just sort of ignore the paradoxes. Don't overthink it. If a player kills a guard in the past, does that affect the lineage of future kings? The butterfly effect, the grandpa paradox. Focus only on your players' actions, their deliberate choices to change the past or use future information. Those are the moments your players will remember themselves doing in the first place, and nitpicking them will just cause the team to seize up and not enjoy the adventure through the past or future in the first place. And in that vein, note that any additional time travel rules in those movies and books are additional plot devices to make things more interesting. In Back to the Future, Marty McFly not only needs to get home, but he needs to save his parents' marriage and make sure that it happens so he can be born. In our own games, if that marriage was to fail, it could have been the milkman, as it were. You only need to include time travel rules if they are fun for your table. It's like vampires. Vampires cannot cross running water. If that doesn't work for your game and your story, you wouldn't use that rule. So don't get bogged down by time travel in that way. And while we're talking movies, let's talk about the three main kinds of time travel that you might have in your game. The first, the most obvious, a trip to the past. Back to the Future, X-Men Days of Future Past, a personal favorite of mine, though not a great movie, Timeline, A Kid in King Arthur's Court, Avengers Endgame. All different kinds of stories that involve time travel with very different rule sets. Some of these movies are very strict in the way you have to perform in the past to make sure you don't upset the future. Some have the goal of upsetting the future in the first place. And some, like Avengers Endgame, work in more of a multiverse kind of setting, where it doesn't really matter if you change the past dramatically, that is a different version of the past. We are just bringing these stories together. And you can also see how much more restricted time travel has to be when we're in the recent past. Whereas in the distant past, our agents become more free, and it's as though their actions were already part of the natural timeline, making things easier to perform as DM. For the most part, the quest of these stories is to return home while dealing with the dangers of the past, whether that is a different and hostile social structure, a militant regime, or dinosaurs. But in D&D, our heroes are heroes and they're always combat ready, so finding a past that is more dangerous than the current present they find themselves in can be a little difficult to orchestrate. So keep that goal away from time itself. Maybe they need to recover a lost item or find information that somebody had in the past. In this way, we're basically performing a very elaborate Speak with Dead spell. They also might need to bring a person from the past to the future in order to explain some sort of blight that is going on across the land. But D&D's history is not the world's history, so we lose a lot of the fun there. In a movie, we go to the 70s, we go to the 1600s, we end up in the Middle Ages, where everyone is still very British, they just say thou. What kind of dialect change do your NPCs have when we go 1,000 years back in time from the age of the shattered moon? That doesn't really work in that environment, so we're using time travel again for different purposes. We are showcasing perhaps a evil god's previous sealing, giving players an interactive vision of the past. An interactive cutscene is certainly the easiest way to deal with past time travel. As I mentioned before, things get easier the more distant you go. What's important here is keep your descriptions vague, because your players will grab on to what interests them. In your current timeline, your city is sprawling, and when we go to the past, it is but a small hamlet. When you describe that hamlet, make sure it is a very general description, and the players will quickly follow you up. Where's the castle? Okay, now we know the castle is important to the players. Let's say it's just being built on the hill. There are flags waving on the walls. Let them ask what kind of flags. Does that interest them? At which point you then make it interesting. And when you say there's a blacksmith, leave it at that. And a player might go, wait, my great-grandfather in my backstory is a blacksmith. And you just pick up that information, drop it on the blacksmith. That's now their great-grandfather. My personal favorite use of past time travel is pursuing the antagonist. The evil wizard has opened a time portal and is going back in time to change the fate of the heroes, to make sure they were never born. The players pursue the villain back through time. For their entire stay in the past, they have a very direct goal. Their villain is someone they can relate to, that is from their own time, and is held to the same rules that they are. This also means that things don't get as hung up on getting back home as the primary goal. When you find the villain, defeat the villain, then you go home with the villain. The second kind of time travel is the recent future, and this is going to be your Groundhog's Day, your Edge of Tomorrow, and we could even put Dark Souls under this line. The characters gain knowledge about future events. They have to perform a certain task, and whenever they make a mistake, or die, or fall asleep at the end of the day without earning love, the day is reset. This is an extremely seductive idea for a lot of people out there, particularly those Dark Souls fans. It is extremely difficult to pull off well in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition because combat kinda sucks. It's true. D&D combat is slow, laborious, and tiring. The only thing that keeps it fresh is the advancement of the story behind those turn-based battles and getting to fight new and interesting things. You will set up the worst kind of grind for your players if you try to do this with combat in mind. You could pull this off in a more city-based sort of setting where it's about NPC interactions and solving a mystery that has befallen the players. As cool as Edge of Tomorrow is, in a gaming sense, poor Tom Cruise is going through the worst MMO of his life. And third and finally, we have the future, being truly catapulted into the unknown. Here we have Back to the Future 2, which showcases different versions of reality based on how the future is changed. Planet of the Apes, where we're technically on a future Earth as the big reveal. But my favorite of these is a cartoon called Samurai Jack, where the villain throws our hero into the distant future to a time where evil has won, with the absence of Samurai Jack. These last two examples, Planet of the Apes and Samurai Jack, highlight my favorite way to use time travel in Dungeons & Dragons. Throwing your group forward through time into an evil or apocalyptic future is the easiest way to introduce time travel to your game. It is always easier to destroy rather than create. To go backwards in time, you have to create an entire past. You need to remember your players' actions, perhaps, or what their lineage's actions might have been. When we go into the apocalyptic future, you just wipe out everything. You enslave everyone they knew, destroy all the temples to the gods, and most importantly, you get to showcase a world where the heroes have failed on multiple levels. The world is now diseased, it is broken, and every NPC, every character they previously knew, is dead or enslaved. It is a rather heavy-handed and dark act to kill off all the NPCs that your players love. To find old lovable Smithy deep in a mine, accusing the players of abandoning the world. How could they? But the future is not set. They could change this world, and when they return to their own time, they are enriched by their experiences there, and you don't have to remake anything. Your players went to a controlled location in the future, found a way back, and are now motivated to continue the quest. This future fling is a great device if you're having some trouble getting your players invested in your villain. Maybe they haven't seemed evil enough to really threaten the world at this point in your story. Maybe a bad set of rolls made them seem a bit goofy. Or maybe, and I've done this as well, your players are completely owning your bad guy and you're not quite ready to give up that ghost. You like this villain, you like this antagonist, so in the final moments, he casts a great spell, completes a ritual that sends them into the future, the villain now free to remake the world. Now with your goals in mind, what the quest is going to be with time travel as the device for the story, you can now tack on your additional rules. And because time travel works so well in a campaign as a side quest environment or a way to increase the lore of your world, you can make some rather dramatic rules. You could say that magical items from the current timeline don't work forward or backward. The energy inside them goes dull, doesn't exist yet. You might have time travel perpetuated by a magical device that becomes broken or has limited capabilities once you're in the future or past. And you could also start thinking about what the ramifications of time travel are. Are there major effects you want your world to have? We of course are going to grab on to the player's deliberate choices to change things in the past and what information they bring from the future, but we can also have our own shockwaves move throughout the world. What if the players knocked over a shrine accidentally in the distant past? Maybe that god no longer exists when they return to the current time. If that seems interesting to you, that's good enough. It's your game after all. If it's going to increase your fun, go for it. But don't get bogged down in something that won't be enjoyable to track. There's also one more thing that you can do that is quite fun when you involve time travel in your campaign. And that is the time police, or time defending itself. Throughout the monster manuals and various bestiaries, there are good aligned creatures that your players will never get to face, such as angels, paladins, and demigods. Making an organization of time police out of good aligned monsters is an absolute blast and a great opportunity to use those monsters that you won't ever end up using otherwise. And of course, these lawful aligned time police don't care if it was the villain's fault or if the players were pursuing a villain. They are at fault, and death is catching up with them. You might also have one of the follow-ups to time travel be a way to save a party member or add a new party member to the group. Often when a character dies, the group is on a quest for resurrection, or maybe even to save that person from the underworld. What if instead we brought that person from the past to the present? What if we used our previous experience with time travel to fix a simple small mistake? Now with the rules established and the greater time travel quest under our belt, the players will know the rules and how to interact with them in order to do much smaller adventures. And that's where things can start getting really layered. And the players will even know the importance of defending their past selves. All I can say in conclusion is if you think this idea is fun, you should do it. It is not overly complicated. It adds a lot to your world, and you may also need it. We've all written ourselves into some bad corners. Our worlds are too small by the end of the first main quest. We've made mistakes. The players have made mistakes they wish they hadn't have done. Time travel is a great plot device to get your entire team back on track, as well as give it some new goals and new motivations. Which is what we're going to do throughout this entire season. Thank you for joining me for Season 4, Episode 1 of DM Gives Inspiration. You can find everything about this show over at kylefergusson.com, 2 S's in Fergusson. Use the contact link to email the show or join the Discord found on that website. There will be a mailbag episode on the 5th and 10th episode of this season. I look forward to joining you next week with more inspiration for your campaigns. Music was by Brian Griffith. You can support this show over at patreon.com/KyleFergusson. I'll see you next week.